Hello, and welcome to the Don't Stop the Education series from the Sennheiser Sound Academy. This week's episode is Behind the Console, the Women of Sound. I'm Tim Moore with my host from the Sennheiser Relationship Management Team, Jessica Dabbs. Jessica?
Hello, and welcome everyone who has joined this meeting. So we are joined today by 6 audio professionals who lead various roles across the industry, and we'll go ahead and introduce them now. So just going down the list, we have Loreen Bohannon, who is currently working with Lizzo, previously Michael Bolton, doing monitors and RF. And then we have Rachel Ryan, who's doing front of house and tour managing with artists such as Iron and Wine. We have Jess Jacobs, who is PM and front of house and also does monitors with artists such as LMA and Pussy Riot. And we have Grace Royse, who works with the LA Pride Festival and the New York City World Pride. And we have Jac Nott, who works with Marina and the Diamonds, as well as the Levelers. And then we have Amanda Davis, who is front of house and production manager for artists such as Janelle Monáe and Tegan and Sarah. So welcome, ladies, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today. I think this is going to be a really fun conversation, just like a group of people talking backstage. So I think for our viewers, the greatest thing that we could do is just have each of you say hello and tell us a bit about yourself. And, you know, since we're talking audio here, what really made you love audio? What got you into this business? And I guess we can start, we'll start with Grace.
Hey, everybody. I'm Grace. I'm a production manager and A1 for the music industry. I've been touring for 17 years as of this year. I started off just right out of high school, literally went into a recording studio, and then my principal had a really hard time getting me back to class after that. I helped record some local bands and then followed those local bands into venues and started relationships there in the venues. And very soon got a call that a monitor engineer had walked off of the gig, pulled their USB card and thrown a fit right out the door. So I stepped in and mixed my first A-level band and ended up staying in that theater for the next 9 years.
Very nice. Very nice. Thank you. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. I started off training as an opera singer, and I just didn't want to do that anymore, and wanted to, had a friend that went to SAE, and he was doing fairly well, and I just took a leap of faith and went to school to SAE in Atlanta and just fell in love with audio. That curriculum is really studio based. So I originally thought I was going to be a recording and mixing engineer and did all the internships and everything. I worked at SAE and I needed some money. So that's how I started doing live sound. I started working at a church. I had a friend, a classmate that did a cold call of just calling a church around Atlanta churches, asking if they needed help. And I went on his interview with him, and they just ended up hiring both of us. And that was my introduction to live sound. I had 4 days of live sound in school. The rest of it has been learning on the job, and it has been amazing. And my first time at the church doing live sound, I'm like, I want to do this. What is this? Let's stick with this. And been doing that ever since 2010.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you. And Loreen?
Well, I started doing audio when I was 16. More formally, it was more like 14. I got involved with a stage crew in high school, and it kind of started the dark spiral I went down into audio as we got farther into high school. How I got into it is in my junior year of high school, the lady who's now my adopted mom, she was my theater teacher then. She brought in a professional sound company to do our musical. And it was the first time I'd ever seen like real life professional production. And I had been noodling around before this, and I wanted to help. And I should say that this is also the year that my mom passed away. So audio came into my life right when I needed it to. And when this happened, it was like, oh, okay. Because the guys came in, they set it all up. We had audio and speakers. And I was like, wow, look at this PA. It made it sound so pretty. And then I helped them load out, and they wouldn't let me help them load out. And I'm someone where, like, if you tell me I can't do it, like, I'm gonna do it. And they were like, you can't help us load out because you don't know how to do stuff. If you know how to wrap a cable, like, we'll let you help us, but we're not going to teach you how to wrap a cable. And I was like, game on, let's do this. So I taught myself how to wrap a cable, and I feel like most of my career has been like, you can't do that. And so here I am 14 years later. So that's how we started.
Very nice. Very nice. And well, let's go across to the UK. Jac?
Hi there, just unmuting it, proving I'm a professional. I'm showing my age now. I actually started when I was 14, back in the middle 80s, so don't do the math. And not dissimilarly to Loreen, I talked my way into a recording studio. I used to play in a band, in a kind of a youth theatre band, and I could never hear myself. And so I got interested in sound, and used to always sneak closer to the PA to try and figure out what on earth I was playing. So I took my way into a local recording studio, and then went out with the artists from there. Went to university as a sidetrack, kind of got involved with bands there, and then when I left uni, I just talked my way into the nearest audio company. The rest, as I say, is history. I did all the driving the van, the lifting the boxes, mixing everything, the whole lot. And then one of the bands I'd mixed came through a local venue, and I said, hey, can I come along? Can I come and see the gig? And they said, well, better than that, you can come and mix monitors for us, because it's the first gig of the tour. We're really nervous. The sound techs are not going to have time for us. So come and mix it. So I went and I turned up, and in the end, I basically ended up being kidnapped and spent the rest of the tour with them mixing monitors. And they were support to a very well-known rock band. And so at the end of that tour, I made myself useful and became the tour, the touring tech for that band. Went into teching, and then obviously from teching have made relationships. And here I am 3 decades later, a monitor engineer, and I'm still loving every second of it, even when it's harsh. So that's kind of me.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. And Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel. I also, much like the other women, started 16 years old, high school plays, high school audio, stage crew, and then started interning in nightclubs when I was underage, because I lied about my age. So, working clubs in California and just pretending, you always add a couple years. It was always about live sound. I would go to concerts and see people and be like, I don't know what that is, but I want to do that. I want to do what that person is doing. I didn't know when I started that there weren't a lot of women. I just went, I like that. I want to do that. So kept interning, and eventually moved to New York and started working in clubs there. I went to school for it, but I was, mostly learning on the job. And you show up and figure it out and hope that, you didn't do it great tonight. You mix 6 bands, you do it again tomorrow. And eventually was picked up by a band that came through a club and started touring. And I think touring was always the goal. And, kind of get kidnapped, and you just don't get off the road since then. You just keep going. So 13, 15 years into it, just keep getting on the bus, keep getting in the van, and just keep going.
Nice. Thank you. And Jess?
Hey there.
Hello.
So I guess I got into this through music originally. So I've always been a musician since I was a kid, and I got into electronic music very early. So I started mixing, in the box stuff, obviously, from a really young age. Went to school for music technology at NYU, but really found that I had just already picked up a lot of the curriculum, and so I wanted to get out there and start doing it. So I left that program, continued performing as a musician, and then started to get really curious about the live audio aspect of things. And some of it from, you know, having ambitious setups that that maybe like the local club person was struggling with. And so I wanted to learn so I could just perform my own stuff, you know, all the way up to realizing that, hey, wait a minute, when I'm actually behind the front of house console, this is really fun. And got to know local venue owners really well in the Boston area. And eventually they started asking me to come in and mix, especially for artists that were coming through, you know, that I was just like a good personality match for. And one of those artists was Madame Gandhi. She came through once Ballroom in Boston and was just like everybody else here, was just starting a tour. And she said, hey, that was awesome. And we don't have anybody. And, you know, want to get in the car and come with us. And I said yes, and just haven't looked back ever since.
Great.
Thank
you all. Loreen?
How many of us have degrees in any sort? How many of us have degrees? All right. Me and Jess are the no degree kids. Okay.
Nope.
So we know you
That
can't
actually-
do it without a degree.
That actually brings us to one of the things I want to bring up as we start this. Of course, it's us here just having a great conversation, but we have people kind of, you know, watching our conversation here. So we'll be getting some questions throughout, and we'll feed those to you guys as we go. Actually, this is the first of the series where I got multiple questions before we even got to the panel. So we started having questions come in through different channels. So as you asked that degree question, Martina sent us a question about, you know, there's a degree question, or, you know, starting as many of you started, what's the best advice you can give someone who wants to get that first start? What, you know, where would you direct someone first? Loreen, I'll give it to you since you just brought that up.
Honestly, it depends on your situation, and I really feel like where you're located in the country and where you are. If you're located in a larger city, it'll be a little bit, I feel like, easier for you to get in depending on how you want to get in. For me, I lived in a smaller market, like a medium market. I came up in Pennsylvania. I lived in the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area, and it's like a market that's in between New York and Pennsylvania. So we did a lot of regional work from the time I was 16. So I got a really unique experience of being able to like work for a medium-sized production shop and really learn everything from the ground up. I mean, I was 16 when I started working for them, loading trucks, fixing speakers, rewiring cables, soldering things. Like my first day I was ever in the warehouse, first time ever, they sat me down, they grabbed this container of like tangled, horrible XLR cables and said, first of all, you have to sort this out. Second of all, you have to fix all the cables. And so I feel like that is a really important part of being a sound engineer that a lot of people miss. So if I was to say anything while you are young and you have the time to take a little bit less pay, I would say take a entry-level position in a production company, work in a shop, learn how the gear goes together, learn how it's wired, learn signal flow, learn how to repair things, because when you're in the field, most of the time you're the person that's troubleshooting. Like you have a tech sometimes, but most of the time you guys have to figure out what's going on your own. And if you don't know how the gear works and you don't have that background as you get into this, it'll be a lot more difficult for you. So I really feel like starting at a small place, a venue, a small size sound company, a churches are great places to start if you have the opportunity. I know there are some ladies here who work in churches. I haven't done it myself, but I know it's an excellent place to start. So if you want to mix, I really, really feel like any great engineer has a basis of gear knowledge. So I don't know, anybody else, Grace, Jess, Amanda can add on to it.
I was gonna second the medium-sized venue. If you want to mix, I probably got my most time on a console with different kinds of genres and bands by running a medium to small level club that I literally had to fix gear before every gig, even sometimes mid-gig, and I got to mix some of my favorite bands. One of the most notable moments from my career when I was young was mixing Propaganda. They pulled up to the back door, they started doing the load in. I was like, where's your engineer? And they're like, what engineer? I was like, yes. this, you know, and I had to even fix NL4 cable in the middle of the gig because I only had so much of it, crummy little club, and they were rocking out and stomping on wedges. And you know, using older gear, I actually had to learn all the mechanics of how and why things do what they do. And running in a really boxy, small room with not a lot of speakers and amplifiers that were always overloading, I learned how to work around things. And I was actually doing upward compression and parallel compression to make my room sound okay. And so later on, when, you know, I get into the industry and these guys and gals are like, oh yeah, parallel compression, and someone explained it to me, I was like, dude, I've been doing that forever. You know, that's just how you get your vocals up over screaming guitars. But yeah, anybody else?
So, yeah, I mean, like Jess, I went to NYU. I was, you know, they had a technical program for engineers, but I was working at the knitting factory. We would 3 floors of bands, 8 bands per room sometimes. And you're fixing NL4 cables, you're fixing, you know, things. You had to come in every day and be like, I have 4 microphones. How do I make this sound, you know, like anything that's not just coming off the stage? So like, I have a degree. I don't necessarily need it for what I do, because you learn it, you know, as you're working, as you're doing. And I think that also gives you some interpersonal skills. You're meeting 8 different bands a night who do or don't have tour managers or engineers. You're learning to deal with personalities of people coming through, and there's a high volume of both people and gear that you have to come into contact with and learn how to, you know, make connections or liaison or deal with personalities, as well as fix your gear and learn the gear you're working on. I worked on a, you know, 24 channel Midas Verona in a corner of a venue with mosh pits, or, you know, with goth night that came in, or a DJ, or, you know, whatever it happened to be. So I went to school and learned some technical stuff, as well as also every night when I got out of class was working in a venue for the rest of my degree. So I'm glad I have it, but I don't necessarily think I need it for what I've done and how far I've gotten with my career. So I think it can go either way. If it's something you want to go to Full Sail or SAE or get a degree, that's great. Hands on the ground, working at production companies, working in, you know, mid-sized venues, I think is a really great experience, in addition to, if not instead of.
I have a question. I just want to ask you guys that have degrees really quick. Jess, has your degree gotten you any work or excluded you from any work at all? Amanda?
I will say that my degree, which is in vocal performance, not audio, the audio school, I have a diploma, like it's audio technology. And like I said, it was studio based, but my bachelor's in vocal performance. And that was something that gave me an advantage to get the Janelle job, because she deals with like orchestration and her vocal approach and everything. That was something that they said to me, was like, oh, that is something that we saw that made us want to speak with you. It wasn't anything about audio. They recognized that I could approach the mix musically and as a musician with that degree under my belt. I will say it does inform how I approach my mixes, very much so. And it has helped me. The SAE education did help me, give me the foundation I needed for live sound. Like I was, you know, picking at it at the church and everything, but knowing how to gain stage and all that stuff came from school. I didn't know anything before I went to SAE. So that did give me a little bit of knowledge as to how to approach the church when I started working at the church.
Awesome. And Jac, I think you had something as well.
Yeah, my degree's not actually in sound. When I started out in the 80s, there were no degrees for becoming a sound engineer or production person or anything like that. The nearest thing I got to, mine's actually in acoustic and vibration engineering, so it's kind of the weirder side of things. But I do really think that the best way of getting your foot in the door is get in a venue and learn how to connect your ears to your fingers to the desk in front of you. Everything else you can learn from a book, but if you can't learn that, no one's going to be able to teach you that. That's something that has to come from within. And certainly in my early days, a good gig was a gig when I didn't get the soldering iron out to make it work. So whilst degrees are a useful tool, I walked out of mine with a first, but it's nothing to do with sound. And I got no job relating to it. But at the same time, because I've been mixing for years in dirty little clubs, I now figured out mathematically why moving a microphone actually created the best result. But I'd already learned that over the previous 6 years by listening with my ears. So I think the most important thing is it's not about paperwork. It's not about learning from that. That's a tool. The best thing is get in a club and get your hands on.
Jess had something to say too.
Yeah, a couple of things. So one, just don't be afraid to say yes to something that feels like it might be a little bit more challenging or it's a little scary. Just, you know, be confident with yourself, be confident with your problem solving. You know, really, like, critical thinking and problem solving has probably, I don't know, been at least, what, 70% of the last year, Amanda? So,
Definitely.
Yeah, it really, it takes you a long way. And it's important to, you know, understand fundamentals, and it's important to understand, you know, more academic topics about sound. However, it really is just, you know, can you keep your cool? Can you solve a problem? And, you know, can you kind of go to places that scare you? You know, maybe you've never mixed in front of 10,000 people before. Give it a shot. Why not? You know, if you know what you're doing with the console and you know, you trust your ears, then absolutely go for it. Another thing that I'll say is to kind of to Amanda's point, I don't have a degree in music theory or anything, but through being a musician and being like very, very highly trained in high school in like a semi-pro way and going to conservatories and stuff like that, I developed really good music theory skills, and that ends up directly translating to mixing ability and the way that you look at a mix. So, you know, right down to like, you can understand, okay, this frequency, this note is this frequency, and this is really popping out of the mix, and I need to do something about it around this area. So having a diverse, you know, background in terms of education is really helpful. Software engineering also really helped me as well. So it's like, I think everybody finds their own path there, and I think that also kind of dictates how you're going to mix. It's part of your style. There's not necessarily a wrong way to do it, but yeah, absolutely, just getting hands on boards and ears in front of speakers is fundamentally the most important.
It's kind of like, I don't know for any of our first tours, but I know like Grace talked about her very first one, and a couple of you, like, for me, how I got picked up for my very first tour when I was doing front of house for Rusted Root is I met my tour manager, the guy who hired me twice. The first time I met him, the very first moment we met each other, I will like explain the situation. I was doing monitors. I was about 19 years old. We were in this horrible little club in Pennsylvania. I think it was called like the Silo or something. And I had Yorkville EM 378 monitor wedges. Now, if anyone knows those wedges, they have this fun little thing that happens where a solder joint gets messed up and it will disconnect and your speaker will just randomly stop working. So you have two ways to fix it. You either take out all of the speakers and solder it yourself, or you slam it on the ground with music going through it. So the very first time I met the tour manager who hired me for Rusted Root, I was on the third drop of my monitor wedge. The first one was like right by knee level, second one was hip level, the third one was chest level, and I'm throwing it on the ground because I don't have any backups. I don't have any spares. Sometimes you have to hit stuff when it was the older analog gear. So he comes in, I slam a wedge on the ground, it starts feeding sound through it, and he looks at me and he's this giant dude. His name is Larry. And he looks at me and goes, and just keeps going. And I encounter him again 2 years later when I was working in a venue that I drove an hour and a half both ways to get to so I could learn digital consoles. He didn't know who I was. I was all bundled up, and I give him the benefit of the doubt because I'm a woman and he's an older guy. And he goes, I couldn't tell that you're a woman. I didn't know anything. You worked your butt off. So they called me the next day, and that's what he told me. He hired me for the road because previously he saw me problem solve, and then he saw me, I hustled just as hard as any of the other dudes that I was working with. And again, I was another woman who was like, I want to do this thing. I never thought about there not being any women in it until I was much farther into the business. Like 7 or 8 years in, I was like, where are all the ladies? Like, am I the only one? So I don't know if anybody else's first tours were like that. Like, you got noticed for something completely random, like not even applied for it, you know, you just ended up out there. So you don't know what opportunity is going to bring you to the path you want to pursue. So just be open to all of them, which is basically what everybody says. And
totally.
such a diverse background. Like, this is not Jess's first career. Jess was a software engineer, and she's a BAMF. She does playback. Grace is a production manager. Amanda Davis is a production manager. Rachel Ryan is a tour manager. Jac, I'm sure you've done your own fair share of it. So there's so many backgrounds that go into what we're doing. Don't be afraid of any of them.
You definitely have to be open. You can't limit yourself.
Yeah.
That was one big lesson that I learned for myself. Like, I'm like, no, I'm going to be a recording engineer, then I'm going to be a mix engineer. And I found live sound. It was like, oh, wait. And even when I found live sound, I didn't even have in my mind anything about touring. I didn't even know there was an option for me. I just was doing it. And just by educating myself and trying to figure out how to do things. I worked at a really cool church where the band, they were all musicians, songwriters. That's all they did was create. So they always brought in different type of instruments and all that stuff. So it really helped me like build and learn. And that's how I found about touring, and so many other options in here, like broadcast engineering, all that thing, because the church used to broadcast their services. So you can't limit yourself. Don't just stop at, I want to be a mixer or anything. You have to be open, because, you know, you may be a better monitor engineer than front of house, or you may be better at organizing and being a tour manager than mixing. You can let that be your intro to it, but you can't limit yourself.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I definitely didn't start out wanting to tour manage. I didn't want to cat herd 10 to 20 people and be like, where are your shoes? Who has after show food? You're now someone's mother of someone. Like, I definitely didn't get into touring to think, you know what I want to do? I want to be a nanny for full grown men. But that's what allowed me to tour. I got brought on as a TM front of house because the band I started with couldn't afford to have two positions. They, you know, it's a sprinter tour or a van and trailer tour, and they need one person to do both jobs. So by allowing myself to take on an opportunity that I didn't know how to do at the time or have any idea about, it got me the opportunity to also mix while I learned how to do something else. So while I TM reluctantly now, it gave me my first opportunity. So while I was already mixing in clubs and already had been in the field for quite a while, someone's like, we need someone to do two things. Can you do that? I just said yes. They never asked, had you done it before? They just said, can you? And I said, sure, I can do that, because I knew that I could mix. And it gave me, and you know, you get one tour and that snowballs. You meet people across the country, across the world, and you make those connections, and then someone knows someone who needs someone else, or, oh, we had her and she did this, or they did this. And it kind of allowed you to, now you're doing monitors, and now you're doing TMing, and you kind of have options. And it's all touring and it's all related. So, you know, you learn that maybe you really love TMing or you love doing monitors. I hate doing monitors. But some of the biggest bands I've worked for have been monitor engineers, and they've been great opportunities. So it just depends on where, you know, what aspect and where, and there are literally limitless options. You can kind of, you know, shift among what you want to do within this industry, because there are so many options.
Yeah, Rachel touched on that connection, and that was the biggest switch that flipped for me. I had been engineering for a few years on the road, and I got my first opportunity to production manage an A-level band. And I just kind of went down the list of all the A-level PMs that I knew, and sent out some emails, made some phone calls. And it was actually Dougie from Cypress Hill that was like, you know, Gracie, like, if you can, I believe in you. I believe that you can solve the problem. And if you can't solve the problem, you can call me and we'll solve it together. And more than a decade later, I've definitely called him a couple times, like with some 911, you know, somebody lost their passport, or I need a lawyer, or whatever it is. And with my arsenal of teammates that I've met on the road over the years, you know, we definitely get it done. So making those connections is vital. That is your crew.
You may not have the answer, but you know who to call when you need to find that answer, and that is key.
I called Grace when I lost my passport in England.
That's right.
Into France.
She was literally hiding in her bunk, approaching the border. Like, dude, I know it's the middle of the night there, but like, I gotta ask you, like, what is gonna happen? Are they gonna put me in jail in France? Like,
I've done the Canadian border crossing where I'm on the phone with another TM, be like, they've seized everything in my trailer. I'm across the border. My band is on the other side. What am I doing? I've called Heather Ryan at 3 o'clock in the morning and be like, I'm at the border. Help. You know, and they talk you through it.
Yeah, I think network is super huge, you know, like for all the reasons everyone's saying. It's not only is it going to help you find work and help you learn, but people are going to be there to help you when you find yourself in a total snafu, like, and that's so important, as you know, as we can all hear right now. Yeah, just like coming into it, breaking into it, you know, whatever you want to call it. It's, you know, meeting people, networking, but also I think most importantly, be kind, because you're gonna run into that person again. You have to, you know, you have to, you know, watch your temper. You have to just be genuine and be kind, and also help people. The more you help people, the more they're going to help you down the road, and you never know when you might need it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the person I met when I was 16, I met Harley Zinker at an Interpol concert, and he just would talk to me about, I've known him since I was 16. Walked up to him, had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, what is that? I want to know what that is. And would always talk to me and was really kind and would explain what he was doing. And over the years, we've just become friends. And I think if it wasn't for his kindness or his interaction with me at such a young age, not knowing what I was doing, I don't know if I would have continued, but he was always kind, always took the time to talk to me. And we all know how busy concerts are. You're doing front of house. You've been up since 8 a.m. You've had late nights. You've been on the bus. You're not sleeping. You're cranky. Whatever life is throwing at you. And he took the time to explain to someone he didn't know and had never met before what he was doing, and was just always really, you know, genuine and kind. And it's, you know, remembering to pay that forward when I talk to other engineers who come up to me, or when you make connections with people on the road, because you know, this industry isn't really tiny. The likelihood that you're going to run into someone again is extremely high. So it is, I think Jess made a good point about the genuine kindness of, like, we all have to be here. Touring is incredibly difficult at the best of times. And, you know, just remembering where we all started at 16 and being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
I love what you said about you will see me again, or vice versa. And we actually even trade positions. I have the honor of working on the Super Bowl property every year, and I get to be an audio PM on that gig with guys and gals that are my A1, my A2. On tours, sometimes it flips, and I'm the A1, and I've got, you know, one of my guys that is sometimes the A2. Now he's PMing this huge country tour, and we kind of roundabout trade places. So one of the biggest lessons for me, actually, you know, Jess was talking about, you know, kind of keeping your cool and being kind. It's not that easy to do, you know, especially when you're pissed off about something or somebody's in your face, and people get adrenalized. And, you know, I've had really big guys like in my face screaming, like spit flying, and, you know, they're worked up and trying to make a scene in front of their artist. The biggest thing I learned was actually from the PM from Foo Fighters taught me, like, the power that you have is in the pause. And it's hard to remember to do, but if you can actually keep your mouth shut, both either, you know, email version or pen or paper, you know, pause before you send that email, pause before you say anything back, that's your power, you know, and taking that time to reflect and decide, like, what's the best thing to do here. And sometimes, actually most of the time, there's not a lot to do. That person maybe just needed to get it off their chest or make a scene in front of their artist. 5 minutes later, you're homies again. but that he also taught me about like the pyramid of production. You know, we think we're like high up as the TM or the PM and we're running the show, but he actually drew like the little pyramid on a piece of paper and like circled the top and like, that's you and this is everyone else, right? Wrong. He flipped that shit around and was like, you serve everyone. Like, you are not in charge. You are actually at the bottom of the totem pole serving everyone. And that saved my life. That's why I'm able to have those positions where we kind of change positions and there's no ego about it. Like, I'm not in charge. I'm actually serving everybody. And that's been like night and day for me.
Can you tell us more about the NFL stuff that you've been doing and the halftime Super Bowl show? Because that's got to go up and down very quickly. Like, can you talk more about your experience with that and what you've been doing?
I actually don't do the halftime. I PM all the stages, the property.
Oh, the stage. Okay.
Yeah. So we do. What's funny is you actually don't see at the halftime show is actually one of the smallest productions. We actually have all around the property anywhere from 5 to 10 stages rocking all day long for several days straight, you know, and it's but it's just as challenging, and there's a lot of personalities. Every single person is traveling in from the outside. So if you take a regular tour where you maybe have anywhere from 15 to 60 people, depending on you know, the size of your tour that you're managing, you got to get them into their venue, you got to get them all the credentials, and you know, this is like a couple hundred people or more, and the teams are huge, the personalities are huge. Every stage has got a broadcast truck, everything has to be networked seamlessly. This year we got the added responsibility of broadcasting the individual stages into the stadium so that everyone could see everything everywhere. I think my network guy clocked about 60 miles a day on foot. He was like just everywhere. So it's basically like a festival, which I do a lot of, but a lot bigger. And like you said, the time crunch is huge. And when it's game day, when they press go on the broadcast button, everybody's got to be on their toes. And it's not the time to disrespect anybody. Actually, if you take your time, speak clearly and slowly. My recording engineer buddy that got me into the industry in the first place always taught me to slow down, that you'll actually spend less time making corrections to the work you're doing if you're slow and deliberate and get it done. You know, you have to work in a timely fashion. We only have so much time to get it done, but you can actually find yourself having to repeat the process, make corrections if you're moving too fast. So that property in particular is a great place to learn to be deliberate, move slowly, and keep your communication lines clear with all your team.
I think the underlying message of all of this that hasn't been totally verbalized by all of us is your reputation in this business is everything, and you are a business. We are a business. Like, we invest in ourselves as businesses. You know, we network, we communicate, we go to conferences, we make sure we keep in touch with the people. You know, we invest in ourselves, our education, and things like that. And I think all of that's extremely important in understanding and moving forward if in this business in any capacity. The quite honest truth is your reputation is everything in this business. How you work, how you interact with people. We talked about it being a very small industry. The reality is it gets around. You know, if you're hard to work with, if you're a terrible engineer who's just trying to pass off their skills and make it up there just for the money, you know, you're going to get found out. People know, you know, especially when you move into the higher level of stuff. Like, Grace, you can totally back me up. Amanda, Jess, Rachel, like, you know, we hear about the people that we don't want to work with, you know, and it doesn't come from our mouths. It comes from other people's mouths. It comes from production managers and tour managers and things like that. You know, you throw out a name of a friend and they've had a bad experience with someone you don't know what their career is. And they'll be like, So you got to be careful, because you never know. Treat everybody with kindness. Take yourself seriously, but not too seriously. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to lighten. You know, self-deprecation is a big part of our job. Like, we spend a lot of time making fun of each other and trying to lighten the mood, you know what I mean? But we all know each other, and all of these people that are in here are here because, you know, they have a reputation. They've worked hard for what they have. You know, none of this came easy for anybody, you know, so work hard, represent yourself well, and you can go very far, and just network and be kind. Like every single one of us has said, be kind, because it is hard. I had the worst year, one of the worst years touring for myself, and just having some of my lady friends like Jess, Amanda was at a show, she came out, and just having those people come out there and support you like changes everything. So just having a great support network is really important too.
Absolutely. I definitely have a texting group of people who is just like other touring people. There's 5 or 6 of us. All of us do different facets. You've got people at the top of the game, other, you know, audio or TMs. And it's just either the, I have a question, please help me, or the, I'm having a really shit day today. How's everyone else doing? Or the, this venue has the best fucking coffee. And it's just, it kind of humanizes you of like, you're not, it can be very isolating to be on tour or to, you know, being away from other people that you meet. And it's just like, having that support system of other engineers and other touring people has been almost, you know, I don't think I could get through the day without those text groups of someone's in China and someone's in Europe and 3 people are in the States, and you're chasing each other's buses or showing up to other people's shows, and just having that humanizing element of like, we've all done this. Someone has always had a shitter tour. Someone's always had a better tour. But you all kind of have these experiences, and you're all learning from someone else's. Careful about this venue, they're going to cut you out of their settlement, or this venue is amazing, make sure to be really nice to them. And you have these connections, and it really, as silly as it may sound, it really is about 34%. Can you mix a show? Can you walk up to that console and kill it? And the other rest of it, because I can't do math, is about, you know, how you get along with the people you're working with. Do you have a relationship with your monitor engineer if you're a front of house engineer? Or are you going to be butting heads the entire time? Do you have a working system with your TM, knowing that they've got your back and that you are actually a team? Because even though you might be an island at front of house, at the end of the day, you all have to make that happen. And if you can't, you know, I've done tours where I've been in screaming fights with other techs that I'm with, and I don't want to be there. I don't want to yell. You don't want to yell. Neither of us want to be miserable in a giant capsule speeding down the freeway. So how do you either get along with that person or put yourself on a different tour? Like, how do you make that work? And it, you know, some days are easier than others.
I'm going to tell on myself. I was a total party animal at the beginning of my touring life. I was out with the punk rockers from Fat Records, No Use for a Name, Good Riddance, No Effects, and we were running around Europe, and I was just doing what you do in your early 20s, you know, and I definitely got stamped as like one of the guys and a cool hang, and Grace can drink with the most of them and all this. And that worked for a time, but it definitely turned around to bite me in the ass at some point. As I got a little older, there were tours that I had the opportunity to join that, you know, the TMs or even the management firms were like, yeah, the wives will never go for it, you know. And that was a big wake-up call for me, that like, oh shit, like I need to balance my, like, Grace is a cool hang and says yes to going out on school nights and partying through Germany with, you know, like it's okay to stay back in the hotel and get a good night's sleep and be a professional. And, you know, not slingshotting too far in the other direction where I'm just like hiding out in my hotel all the time, but, you know, setting that balance and just knowing like, yeah, you can definitely get yourself into trouble if you're just always available for the party, and keeping that line from blurring, you know, because being a woman out on the road, there were definitely times where I think that line got blurry for some of my male counterparts, and they were like, thinking that maybe there was a relationship brewing. And if you're not out drinking all night with these people, it's probably less likely to happen. And so I'm not saying be a nun, but there's definitely a balance, and just be aware of that balance, you know, especially if you're at the beginning of your career. I had to do a little bit of backstepping to get to the point where, you know, the tours trusted that I could be the responsible grown up and I wasn't just in it for the party.
One of the unspoken things in that conversation that Grace just had is, ladies out there, if you want to get into this, the quite frank truth is we are judged in a different way from the men still. It's getting better. I will say, you know, we've all been here for a long time. It is getting better, but there is still judgment on women that is not necessarily passed on men, particularly when you're dealing with partying and things like that. You know, there are certain reputations that women can get stamped for that make us not be able to tour. And unfortunately, for us, women, past experiences with women who might have fit that bill tend to taint some of our interactions a little bit. So it is getting better. What I do want to ask everybody is, I feel like everybody works with pretty large bands that scaled to pretty large production setups. I wanted to know how you guys scaled your skills. Like, I know in my situation with Lizzo this year, I went from like playing the 930 Club to playing 75,000 seats, you know, within 6 months, you know, so I had to scale skills that I didn't know, you know, and I had to reach out to people. What did you guys, you know, Amanda, you had Janelle Monáe and Tegan and Sarah, Jess, Riot, LMA, Rachel, you had Silver Sun Pickups and all those guys. Grace, you had Sublime with Rome. Jack, I mean, you had the Flaming Lips and those guys. Like, how did you guys scale your skills? And when you took the position, that initial position, were you nervous and were you unsure that you could do the job, but you still took it? Rachel?
I think for me, the biggest job that I was wholeheartedly probably unprepared for was when I was working with the Strokes. They had just come back after being on hiatus for however many years, and I was doing monitors, and it wasn't a position I was comfortable in. But I really feel like the best way to learn is to literally dive in. You have to do the job to do the job. You know, you call everyone you've ever met to figure out, how do I do this? How do I hook up my amps? I had people on the phone constantly FaceTiming, like, is this how this console connects? Like, where's my amp for this? To then, you know, I was scared shitless, but you just kind of have, if you're not a little bit scared of your job at all times, I don't think the job is right for you, because then what's the fun? Like, how are you going to learn anything? That's an experience I didn't want to give up. And, you know, it was 2 years of some really massive, you know, you played at 80,000 people in Spain. Like, that's an opportunity I wasn't going to pass up, whether I was ready for it or not. I wouldn't have known if I didn't just do the job. And I fucked up a lot of things, and I, you know, learned a lot of things, and I'm probably a better engineer now because of it. But I feel like you kind of have to do the things that scare you and call everyone you've ever met and do the research to figure it out, because that's how you become a better engineer or a better tour manager, a better production person. And if you just say no because you think you're not ready, you'll never do anything. So I think it's kind of, you know, you have to take the opportunities that scare you and also realize what fits and what doesn't.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I remember years ago when I was starting out, I'd kind of talked my way out of little venues and into being a system tech, and we were in the old Wembley Stadium and we had Aerosmith and Kravitz headlining. And, you know, as a system tech, you fly your PA, you put your monitors out, you stack up everyone's boards and all that, and then you're the person who's mixing the openers. And I was, you know, pretty scared, to say the least. And the Jumbotron was down right in front of the desk, and literally as it lifted, I ended up mixing the openers to Wembley Stadium. And I was kind of, I'd not even heard the wedges, not even pinked them, because the screen had been in the way until they literally lifted it up. And that was a long time ago now, but I still feel like that in most gigs. And I think if you don't feel nervous at the start of every gig, then you're not double checking everything. You're not alert to everything. You know, even with the band I work with now, I've been with 15 years. I know them pretty well. I pretty well know what to expect of them, and, you know, moods and all this sort of thing, and happy days and bad days and big gigs and small gigs. But I'm still scared shitless before they walk on stage, because I think that's what keeps us alert. And as Rachel was saying, you know, if you don't put yourself into these positions, you don't learn. And the best way to learn is to ask for help. And the even better way to learn is to listen to people who have been around longer than you, or have done it already, or have been there, or, you know, the person that's giving you the help maybe 12 years, 20 years, 40 years younger than you. Doesn't matter. If they've got the knowledge and they're happy to impart it and it makes sense to you, listen to it. And you can either go, yeah, that's great, that's a brilliant idea, didn't think of that, or you can go, yeah, tried that, that's rubbish, thank you very much. You know, so again, it's back to being kind. It's about listening. It's about learning. And it's more importantly about not being afraid to ask for help, because pride is a thing that I think women are a lot better at sticking in the back pocket in a bad situation. And that's a gross generalization, guys, sorry. But, you know, I tend to find women will hold up their hands in this situation more and go, do you know what? Hey, can you give me a hand? Because I can't do it, you know, and there's some things we can't do, but there's other things we can. So yeah, be afraid, be very afraid, and enjoy being afraid, because that is what will keep you in the business and keep you enjoying it.
Well, Jac, on that note, do you have any tips for keeping your nerves at bay on the job?
No, I have actually on occasion, when everyone went into digital era and, you know, PM1Ds and PM5Ds first came out, I was one of the last, I'll be honest, I was one of the last engineers to kind of move from analog. Won't go into the details of that, but I do remember as my band walked on stage at a festival, and it was a huge festival, and nothing was coming out the wedges because something was wrong in the programming. I nearly threw up in the bucket next to me. You know, I was like that scared. But the thing is that my drummer walked on stage, and he normally does his line check himself, and he's like, hey, Jac, I haven't actually heard anything yet. I was like, yeah, welcome to my world. Get on stage and start playing, and we'll figure it out, you know? And I think, I don't know, you have to find it from within. And you also have to be sure of yourself can be interpreted as being cocky, don't get me wrong. But you have to understand you're there because they want you there. They trust you as a monitor engineer. You've been asked to be there, and you are their first port of call. So you just have to put all your worries aside and focus, you know. And as long as you focus, and I'm the worst, I'm so nervous, and I double check everything 6 times. But having done that, I'll then go, oh, did I check that? But by doing that, it normally works out okay. And on that incident, literally as the guys walked on stage, I found that a previous tech had dumped all the outputs on a VCA, found the VCA, everything sprung to life. And then at that point, I'm mixing my pants off, you know, just to get the sound together. Well, no one died, you know, we won, we had a great gig. And that's the important thing is, you know, the beauty of live sound is it's here and it's gone in an instant. It's not like a recording where you listen to the same mistake for 2 weeks. You know, it's here, it's gone, breathe, get on with it. You know, that's kind of how I see it. And also be human, you know, if you do fuck up, you know, you'll regularly see me behind a board and something will happen, the band will look at me and I'll just stick my hand in the air and just go, and they laugh because they're like, well, okay, so you fucked up. It's you, at least I know it's not me, and then they'll carry on, and then life moves on. You know, it's about being honest, and that's one of my kind of probably signature traits is just putting my hand in the air and going, yeah, okay, yeah, we've got it, or something's wrong, I'll put my hand in the air and go, yeah, I know, just so that everyone relaxes and then carries on. You know, so top tip there.
You have to find something within the gig where you're comfortable. My first tour ever was Janelle Monáe, and the board that they told me that I had to use was the PM5D. And so I'm like, I was cool with that. I was so nervous because I never toured before. I really wanted to, but I never toured before. But I was on the cruise ship for 6 months before that, and the board I had was the PM5D. So I was like, cool, that's what y'all want me to use. I'm not going to make any fuss about changing consoles or whatever because I'm nervous as heck. I don't know what to do. But if this is what you want me to use, great. I know this console and I'm going to do what I know to do on this console. So that like kind of moving forward, I was like, okay, find something that you're familiar with or you know or that you're comfortable with that you can kind of rest in, that will kind of you can refocus your nervous energy and be more comfortable.
I want to, so back on what Jac is saying with confidence, it's true. You have like, so I'm a monitor engineer mostly now. I want to do front of house, but somehow I keep ending up in monitors because apparently I'm really good at it and I calm people down. the truth of the fact is if you are freaking out, when something is going wrong, everybody's freaking out, especially if you're on stage. Like you're like the wind vane. If they say you freaking out, everybody's gonna be like, oh my God, something's wrong. If you remain calm, even if you are on the inside like throwing up, like Coachella this year with Lizzo, the first weekend, literally we had no playback for the whole time, like full on cut out. Jess Jacobs rode in the next weekend and rescued our butts to do playback for us, but we didn't have a playback engineer. We had a 2012 computer on stage and it went down, guys, like full on, no vocal. It was just her and vocal, no tracks, nothing, quiet. Lizzo, previously to this point, really had no idea who I was. But in that moment, I couldn't do anything to help them. So I looked around and looked at what I could do to make the situation better. And what I did do is I asked my tour manager to come over and dictate to me the timings of the set, since we no longer had a click track or anything available to us. She was dictating me the timings of the set, and I was speaking into my talkback microphone to Lizzo to time out when she was talking, when she would start her song, when she would do her thing, calmly. Like, I'm dying over here in the monitor console. Everyone is running around, freaking out, talking to me, and I'm trying to talk to her and get her through her set. We got done with the set. I walked back to her trailer and I just was, and honestly, she was incredible. Like every time the track cut off, she came back in right on beat. Like, I don't know how she kept this straight in her head, but she did. And I told her that I've worked with artists for 15 years and I've never seen anybody that was able to do that. And as soon as I opened my mouth to speak, she was like, oh my God, it's you. You were the person in my ear. Thank you so much. You got me through that set. And then I want to take that and then fast forward to Glastonbury, biggest show of my life, just like 2 months later after this. Talking about not freaking out. I didn't have frequencies. I didn't have half the gear that I was supposed to have drop ship there. I didn't have anything. We are 15 minutes from going on stage and I still don't have ears out to my techs, to my crew. I don't have frequencies. I'm on the phone with Claire. I'm on the phone with Britt Rowe. I'm on the phone with the festival. Like all the guys, like thank God for the techs at the festival, talking about everybody listening to the guys who have done it before, listen to the guys that are there, listen to the people on your stage. If you're freaking out and truly freaking out, turn around and ask someone for help. I turned around and looked at these guys and I was like, guys, I don't have anything. I don't have microphones. I don't have ears. And they were like, we got you. They shut down half of their stuff. They gave me their mics that were already wired into their system. They gave me the frequencies from their ears and I got through Glastonbury. 50,000 people, okay? Like 15 minutes for this to get up. You know, no one really knew that I was freaking out other than like my stage manager when he would come up and ask for his stuff. And I was like, shoot, I can't right now. Like, and he was like, oh, okay. But like keeping calm enough that the rest of your crew isn't freaking out is the really important part in any position you're in, particularly if you're in a management position. Like if you're the production manager and you are freaking out, like bad move, because you are like, you're where the crew goes. Like if something happens, like I'm going to the production manager if something's going wrong. When I didn't have my stuff, I had to go to the production manager. So if my production manager were freaking out, it would be a whole different level of freak out for me. You just have to remain calm. And I got that lesson correction when I did Warped Tour and I was doing front of house and I ran up on stage because we didn't have a hi-hat and I was, as the British call, flapping. I was flapping. And the monitor engineer, and he was a little rough about it, you know, and sometimes guys can be in the moment. And he pulled me to the side and, excuse me, so he goes, don't ever fucking come up on my stage like that again. And I was like, these people can see you. They can see you. They gauge the freak out. You don't ever need to come up on stage yelling or anything. You walk up here calmly and you tell me what the problem is. Do not ever come back up on my stage like that again. And I was mad for a second. And then I realized the truth of what he was saying. Everybody can see you. Everybody can see my red ass head coming from front of house freaking out. Like, you know what I mean? So like, calm, like keeping that in mind, that you're the weather vane for me, like makes me stay much calmer with my freakouts, like knowing that everybody else is looking at me.
I think that's a really important thing. If you're going on stage, you're meant to be there. So why do the roadie shuffle? Just walk out and solve your problem. You know, sorry, Jess, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. Yeah, I think like kind of going back to something that Grace was saying earlier, that moment to pause and how powerful that is. learn a little bit about meditation and some deep breathing. You know, get yourself together, get yourself a little routine. If you need it 30 seconds before the show starts, or 30 seconds before line check, or whenever your stressful moment is, figure out some way that you can help yourself, because like everyone here is saying, if you help yourself and you stay calm, you're absolutely helping everyone, not even just the crew. You're helping the band, you're helping the artist, you're helping even the audience, because everybody can feel everybody else's energy. Another thing that I think helps me stay comfortable, anyway. Oh, and one other thing before I go into like systematizing, accountability is huge, right? So if you make a mistake, just admit it. The number of times that Amanda heard me over talkback last year say, "No, that was just me, forget it." It was like, I don't even know how many times she never got mad at me or anything. It's like, okay, cool, now it's solved, we can move on to the next thing. It's done. Admitting a mistake allows everyone to just move on, and then it's done. Get mad about it later, whatever, but just admit it and move on. Quickly, the one thing that I think on the scaling question, it kind of answers both questions. So how did you scale up? How do you stay calm? Both things are a matter of process. So no matter what stage we played last year, Amanda and I had the exact same pre-show process, same line check, same everything, down to the same order of things, because that way both of us could know when everything was done is the line check. Okay, we're a stage. Now we both have confidence in that, and so we can move confidently into the show, and that confidence then again translates to the crew around you, your performers, and everything else. So having reliable processes for whatever your tasks are. It's a totally different checklist for a keys tech than it is for a front of house, and it is for RF tech and whatever, but it's all still the same. It's like the size of the gig doesn't necessarily have to dictate your process. Your process can remain the same. You may have to, if you add 3 background singers, okay, now you have to add 3 mics, but put it in the place that makes sense, such that you feel comfortable with your process. And if you trust your process, then you trust yourself, and then you trust that you feel like you're done when you're done.
And I think you touched on some good points as well about, the meditation or taking time for yourself, or creating your own personal ritual before you go on tour. Like for me, I bring my own tea. I have my tea mug that comes with me. And I know that I have in the morning, if I have my cup of tea, Yorkshire tea with milk in it, the rest of my day is manageable. I can control that. That is something that I can do on the bus, in the hotel, before load in. I take 5 minutes, I make my tea. If I drink the tea, I'm happy. If I'm happy, everyone else is happy. The day could go to hell. I can't control everything. Even with your checklist or your system, I can control my cup of tea. That is something that I do for me, that I can do every day, that I know that's like, all right, I've done this. I can do anything else. Everything else is manageable. So whatever, if it's coffee, if it's, your big thing is going out and getting breakfast that morning, or you like to shower before sound check, or whatever that little thing for you is, because most of your day is spent around making sure everyone else is okay, and that everyone else has their things, and that you're working as a team. You have to remember to take those 5 minutes and just be a person. What makes you happy? What's your thing? Do you want to get ice cream every day? Go get ice cream every day. But what is that one thing that you can do for you that allows you to then help everyone else?
And when they come, use your off days wisely.
Yeah.
No, you're already most of the time you're with everybody on your crew on tour. When the off day comes, you're probably not going to see me.
True story.
I'm taking my off day, because that's exactly what it is. And it's an off day. I'm off. Like, use it wisely, because if you fill it up with all this, sometimes you'll have group activity, with the tour or whatever, and that could be fun, but don't go out like hanging out and trying to be this or whatever. If you're first starting tour, I get it. You're young, it's your first tour, you want to just go out, but you have to use it wisely. Use your off days wisely, so you can be the best that you can be, the best person that you are, and the best whatever position you're in.
Well, so switching gears a bit, I'm gonna feed you guys a couple of questions from the audience and just get your feedback. So we had Jasmine Battle who wants to know, what are the contents of your Pelican and what are your must-haves for a tour?
I'll start because my Pelican has been crazy packed all year. Necessary items in my Pelican: rat sniffer sender, cue box. I carry an XLR, a 1/4 inch, and most USB cables with me of any type, also lightning cables, and a FireWire adapter, because who knows when you have to record or get something into your computer. I carry a ton of adapters, like male, female turnarounds, Ys, phase adapters, ground lifts, all kinds of things like that. I carry a soldering iron. And I carry skin tack because I do monitors a lot, and when people are sweaty, skin tack is an excellent thing to keep the tape on their skin. And then I carry tons of e-tape and gaffer and a flashlight, headlamp flashlight.
I'd
Awesome.
say cable ties as well. Basically, just anything that you have on your stage, try and bring a spare of it. You're probably going to need it at some point. And that at some point might be 5 minutes before the show goes up. And at least, you know, if it's in your Pelican, it's on your stage already, you can just run out and solve the problem. Then it's not on the tour bus, it's not in the suitcase, it's not, you know, used to be Radio Shack down the street, it's right there. So basically just a safeguard. And first aid kit stuff too. Definitely need that.
I will say that the bigger tours, you don't actually have to bring a work box out on, I found out this year. But, you know, I carry one around anyway.
Right.
And I keep a Pelican per position. So I have my monitor Pelican that has my, you know, the Jody vac that I clean my in-ears out with. My TM Pelican has my tea kettle, my candle, and, you know, 18 million different office supplies. And my front of house, you know, Weekender Pelican has my headphones, my console guardians that come with me, and my thumb drives. Because I, you know, in a pinch, I can mix a show with those 3 things and probably with 2 of those things. So, you know, it depends on what position I'm in. I have a Pelican for each, and they're all different sizes.
My Peli migrates between my my bus bag and my Peli according to whether we're going on the tour or whether we're flying. I always have with me, if I'm checking a Peli in, I always take the contents out that I need to make my show work. Yep. So my ears, my USB keys, I always have a spare set of ears. But in the actual Peli, then I will also have, I have artists who have different ears in them. So I've got my 2 main ones and a different model for a singer. I've got a spare set of generics. I've got an RF scanner, a cable tester. I've got the most important thing of all, Barocca Fizzy Good, make you feel nice. So if you wake up in the morning and you're hanging, Barocca is the answer, and having that and a pack of Nurofen in your Peli is a lifesaver to me. I've also got I keep everything in like the little zip microphone pouches. So I've got a pouch that's got obviously a multimeter, soldering iron, basic tools, snips, that sort of thing. But I've got another one which is kind of a me care thing. I get really badly bitten by mosquitoes, and so you don't know at festivals. So I'll have, you know, miniature sun cream, miniature mosquito repellent, that sort of thing. And quite often the artists are in need of it. You know, oh, I've got a headache. All right, here, have some Nurofen. You know, here, have this, have that. Obviously spare ears, cables, and I think that's about it. Oh, health and safety, fluoro jacket, of course. You know, I tend to let my production manager sort out gaffer tape and things like that because it doesn't fit otherwise. It's pretty rammed.
I typically have e-tape, Velcro, every type of USB cable, adapters for Thunderbolt, or like since Mac wanted to change their whole port thing, you know, you need all these adapters now. What else? I have gloves, the headlamp. I used to carry my own Squawk Box speaker for talkback, but now I just put it on I just order it through the production. company. I carry my own Waves server setup deal too. So I have my server, laptop, all the cables, network switch, all that stuff. I carry all that on my own. And yeah, just screwdrivers. I did start carrying solder, but I usually like never used it. So I made space for other stuff. But yeah, turnarounds, because one time I went on tour and I got gear from a production company that I will not name, but they sent me a profile, and to, with the profile, the stage rack only connects via quarter inch. What venue do you know where you patch into the drive lines with quarter inch? And they didn't send me any turnaround. So I bought some, and I'm like, I'll carry these for the rest of my life, because I never know where I'll end up in needing XLR to quarter inch turnarounds.
I will say multimeter is a hugely important tool in my work. Like one of the most important tools, and I feel like something that a lot of like sound engineers gloss over and people don't talk about, is how much a sound engineer needs to be aware of power and how it affects us in our show. Like, especially, Jac, you're in the UK and stuff. We're in the US. Like, we have a whole different power setup than anybody else, and knowing how to deal with that, knowing when you're in 240. Yeah, understanding that it's moving, understanding 50 hertz and 60 hertz. Like, it's 60 hertz over here, it's 50 hertz over in Europe. Understanding that difference, like understanding power, how power flows, like when you have a neutral out and stuff like that, is really important. Like, so I'll give you an example. We were in Brazil, my very first international tour with Michael Bolton, very first time out of the country. We went to Brazil. And if anybody knows South America, I'm sure a bunch of you know South America. Power is crazy there. In Chile, it's fine. In Argentina, you're cool. You get into Brazil, each like different state in Brazil is a whole different power setup. And I was in Bahia, which is like the island part of it, like where they go. And I had what is called Delta power. And if you know anything about Delta power, it's 2 legs of hot and 1 leg of neutral, no ground. And so it's also 480 volts. So 1 leg of that is 240. So we get there, I walk on stage. I have a 5D, much like Amanda. When I first started with Michael Bolton, it was a 5D. And I go to the console and everything's powered up and I don't think anything of it. Like, if I were a sound company, I would test everything before I plug my stuff in. Wrong. I start flipping through the faders and half the console like starts flashing and shuts off. And so I'm like, well, maybe it's a power supply thing. The 5Ds, they always have a second power supply with them. It happens sometimes. So I go down and I grab the ring on the power supply, and as soon as I touched the ring, I was like cemented to it because it was wrong. Like, I had an entire leg of 240 come up my arm, and I actually still have the scar. It's hard to see, but on my knuckle right here, that's the exit wound from where the electricity arced out of my finger into the rim of the into the edge of the case. And then I immediately had a ring on, and my tour manager, like, I had to like throw myself off of it. And my production manager like took me, put my hand in ice, pulled my ring off, and like threw me in the ocean because we were right on the beach to like take out all the electricity in me. So on top of that being wrong, they had wired it incorrectly. We had 60 volts in the trusses. If you metered the truss, the actual truss was electrified. And if you metered the ground, if you took the prongs from your thing and you metered the ground, we were getting 40 volts in the ground. So our whole thing was a nightmare, and it took us 8 hours to get the power sorted. We had to pull out all of their crazy boxes. We had to get a line from the hotel to come out. So if you don't understand power and how to make it work, like it's a big detriment. And that's in any scenario. I feel like a lot of people don't know about power. A lot of lighting people in video, they'll know a lot more about it than a lot of audio people, but we have to deal with it, particularly if you're a tech or if you're a monitor engineer. Like, on tour as the monitor engineer, stage is me. First thing I do is I connect feeder, get the stuff up, start getting power going. That's the first part of my day. So If you don't have a tech and you can't do that, you're going to run into a lot of problems. And like a multimeter is like, even down to like being on a circuit board, taking your multimeter and seeing if there's signal coming from one end to another, you know, is a really handy thing to have.
Not to mention incredibly dangerous. Like that could have been your life. That's not just your workflow where you're knowing your day. That could kill people. And that, you know, safety is a huge issue. You've seen stage collapses. Someone grabs a truss and touches something else and immediately, you know, someone is dead. So it's a safety issue as well as not just running through, you know, your normal day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's another item in my work box that'll save your life, and it's about $1.50 is a high-vis vest. On a lot of our festival grounds, you know, you'll see all the teammates that are with the festival wearing them because there's these heavy machineries moving around. And a lot of the festivals, light focus happens with these big boom, and the operators, you know, are up in the lift. They're not down low. And, you know, if you've got it, throw it on. You know, you don't have to wear it for show. It's not exactly fashionable, but I've seen a couple too many close calls to not wear one myself. And I just highly recommend, even if it's the little stripes, you know, it's not even the full vest, the little stripes that buckle in the front. It's all the difference between an operator looking down and seeing bright green stripes or looking down and seeing nothing because you're in all black for show.
Awesome. Well, we have another question from the audience that I'll throw at you guys. Someone has asked, can someone explain the different positions on a tour, maybe just on a basic level? So the difference in a tour manager and a production manager, and then the difference in a monitor engineer and a front of house engineer, just if someone wants to take this one.
Just basic layman terms, tour manager deals with people, production manager, gear, and the people who deal with the gear. So sometimes on tours, the production manager's job is to hire the crew members. Sometimes it's through other avenues like management, or if they already have somebody, but just a basic rule of thumb is tour managers deal with people and production managers deal with gear. You make the production happen as the production manager, and the tour manager make sure you get from A to B. And Rachel could probably expound on that, but.
I mean, you summed it up, you know, it depends on the size of your production as well. You know, sometimes I've been a tour MTM, front of house driving, and then we have a merch person. But, you know, typically front of house is you're the person at front of house. You're mixing the show for the audience. Monitor engineers are on stage making sure the band is happy. You could have tours that have a production assistant, a production coordinator, a tour assistant. You know, labels are a bit fluid as far as tour hierarchy can be. And sometimes someone has I have a good friend who's labeled as a production coordinator, and she does so much more than that. Her job is massive. And that, I think, just comes down to title. But I think, Amanda, you got it right. Tour manager deals with the tour and the artist and kind of the overarching things, and a production manager deals with the actual show, the production, your crew, your techs themselves.
And the tour manager and production manager do have to work together.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it merges, and sometimes that is, I know in Janelle, the tour manager and the production manager is one person, because they both kind of work hand in hand. But if you have two different people, when I'm production manager, I always tell the people on tour, don't ask me any hotel questions, because that's not my job. We're on stage, then you can ask me some questions, but don't ask me about your hotel room and all of it, because that's not, I'm production
manager. Even as a tour manager, I'm like, don't ask me about your hotel room. It's in Master Tour. Like
exactly.
The amount of time that I have to take to look it up, you could have looked it up. That's where the pause comes in. Because if I pause and then like Grace said, I pause, I take out my phone, the other person usually goes, oh no, I can just look it up. But if you give them that pause of like, if I have to look it up in front of you, you have time to look this up.
How long into your tour week for my tour managers in the tour before it just takes a look when someone comes up to ask you? They'll be like, what is, and then you just go, you're just like, and they're like, Master Tour.
Master Tour. I have a sticker that says check Master Tour, and it is on my Pelican, and it is usually that lid is flipped open, and I just point at it.
So even as a production manager, like my job is to build the schedule for the day of show. And if you come asking me, I feel like I'm pretty organized. Jess can
I vouch for that. I vouch for that.
I have let you know the schedule for the day. Don't come and ask me what time is sound check. Look at your text message, look at tour master tour, something.
Look at the paper like posted in the venue.
Yeah, like you have to be, accountable and be a professional. Like there's people kind of it gets kind of weird because our environment, our culture is so laxed that they forget that you're at work, and you can't forget that you're at work. You have to maintain a schedule, and you have to know the schedule for yourself. You can't, if you're working at FedEx Kinko's or somewhere, you can't go call your manager and say what time I'm supposed to be at work. No, you're supposed to show up at work at what time you're supposed to be there. So you have to have some self-accountability and know who to ask and different questions.
But there's always that one band member who doesn't know how to use a phone or won't check their email or doesn't know how to read.
Right.
Artists are the exception.
Yeah.
Artists are allowed to not, where is my phone?
I lost it 6 cities ago. My wife sent me a new one. Doesn't know their own password.
On the subject of like the different roles and stuff like that, the tour manager, like they said, like there is a really basic breakdown of it. Of course, the tour manager deals with the artists and people, but more so than that, the tour manager is hotels, travel, transportation for artists and anybody else. Sometimes the production manager does crew travel, but most of the time not. Most of the time it's booked through the tour manager. And the tour manager almost never has anything to do with the actual production. So you can't, like, if you have those two roles, you can't go to like the tour manager and be like, hey, do you know about this gear coming in? Because they're going to be like, that is not my wheelhouse. I have nothing to do with this. Please don't ask me about it. When you're the production manager, I feel like you're in charge of the whole scope of things, not just like the gear and things like that, but how the show runs, how it gets set up, what crews come in, when you call in the stagehands, how you're trucking it, how you're shipping it, customs. You have to deal with border patrol and having your lists and all of that going over there. So like the production manager to me deals with the gear and the people who run the gear, but more importantly than that, like the transportation of gear, the safety things. Like production managers will do all the safety stuff in the venue. They need to know about rigging. They need to know about weight ratings. There's a lot of things that come in that role. So I feel like to me, like tour manager is tour, and then production manager is scale. Like if we're planning out a production, like we were planning out the Houston Rodeo. Our production manager is incredibly invaluable in that process because they're the person you go to. You say, here's what we want to accomplish. And the production manager is like, this is how we can do it. I'm sorry, this idea won't work for what you want to do. And they're the people that kind of have to have the knowledge and the scope of how to execute something. And then front of house and monitors. Front of house is what you hear in the audience. Front of house is creating an experience for the audience. Most often, if you're not being directed by management, you're mixing for yourself and for your own pleasure, which is why most people want to do front of house, because it is much more fun. In monitors, you are mixing for somebody else's experience. You're mixing for the artist, you're mixing their stage, you're mixing so that they have what they need to get through the show. And that could be a variety of things. Like in Jess's case, she doesn't just do monitors, she does playback and autotune, in her world. So there's a lot of things that happen, on stage that aren't just, you could be a monitor engineer, but monitor engineer implies tons of things. Same thing with front of house. I know tons of front of house people who are running playback from front of house as well, So I think the roles are distinct, but we touched on this much earlier in the discussion, that nothing is closed and nothing is off limits. If you're in this business, you've touched in all of these areas: tour management, production management, front of house, monitors. You've done all of it. You've stage managed, you've crew managed, you've patched, you've pulled cables, you've done feeder. Like we've all done all of the jobs. It just is what resonates with us the most. And oftentimes sound people end up in dual positions. I don't know why that is. You don't really ever see like a lighting guy production manager or a video guy production manager. It's always like a sound person tour manager, sound person production manager. Either it's because we as sound people have a more overall, we have to be much more aware of all of the other departments for our setup all the time. Like we need to know where lights are, where motors are, you know, particularly if you're the monitor engineer. Like I need to base my setup off of all of these people on stage, you know, so we're really aware of what's going on. So I feel like in our particular side of things, in audio, we have the ability to do all of the jobs, you know, because we have to do all those things. I know that most of us started production managing because we were just really tired of things not getting done the way we needed them to get done on the road. Like things didn't show up that we needed and stuff. So we're like, you know what, I'll just do it myself. Like, because I know what I need, you know. And
Grace,
I don't know.
can you give some, is there any distinction between, like, you production manage the Super Bowl, like what's the difference between road production management and what you do for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, in the festival world, the production manager gig definitely pushes hard on the labor coordination, and I think that's actually why I started becoming a proficient production manager. Is I'm kind of the labor lead whisperer, especially in some of the harder markets like New York City. We've got some really strong unions out in Boston. You know, these are guys, and they are mostly guys, that just take no shit from anybody, and you have to be on your toes or they will eat you up. And you know, one of my favorite things about them is they literally will not let you talk shit back to them. You know, if one of my guys is being hard to work with, I've seen them mid-rap drop the cable and walk away. You know, like, I get paid either way, so go F yourself, you know. It takes
and what she's not saying about that is you're not allowed to touch the cable after he drops it.
Oh yeah, that's true too. Yeah, don't touch anything while they're on break. Don't push any cases. In the festival world, it's definitely a lot of that. It's production coordination of all the different teams and lining things up in a schedule that makes sense for the grounds team, for the staging team, and coordinating all of those different labor departments and balancing budget. I think one of the most huge gigs I ever got to do was last year hosting New York World Pride and Madonna's team, and problem solving things that are not easily solved for artists that don't take no for an answer. So again, reaching out to my networks and going, I think that guy at SAR owes me something, and I think he has what I need. And I think even though it's 4 a.m., if I call him, he'll answer his phone because our relationship's strong, and I can actually get this going by our 6 a.m. rehearsal. And same with the labor leads. They see me coming through there on tours, especially in Boston, those rigging guys. We have a really good relationship where they might not know all my stage team because they haven't seen this tour before. And I walk in the door and they're like, oh, Grace is here. All right, whatever, it's going to be a good day. And we have those relationships built. So now I'm able to walk into places like New York and be like, I know this is a huge ask and the schedule is gnarly, but you know, and I know that together we're going to get it done, you know, and we're like knuckles, even though this producer over here is screaming and throwing a fit, we can keep that eye contact. Like, we know that all's well and we're going to get this done. Same with dealing with different cities. That's kind of the craziest thing, is like getting permitting in places like New York City to have fireworks, to build ginormous stages out on the pier, to have record-breaking crowds, and have a fire marshal that we've met each other a few times, and he knows that I'm not going to do anything to endanger my kids, which is what I call the people attending the concert. I'm not going to do anything to endanger his teams, and we're going to have a really good time. And at the end of the day, this concert is going to happen, even though there are crazy storms coming down the river at us. We've got a mayor who's not super stoked, and a producer who's got real big dreams and not a lot of money. So yeah, dealing with the heavy machinery, scheduling those crews and keeping those relationships healthy is definitely why I've excelled. And we did get a question about kind of the double standard of, you know, women having to stay calm when guys are screaming and the toe-to-toe arguments. And I can honestly tell you that's why I'm getting requests for women in positions. I'm getting calls like, hey, we want a girl monitor engineer. It's not because she's hot. It's not because she's a better mixer or has better ears. It's because we are now developing a reputation as women of like having that calm demeanor, keeping a smile when it sucks, letting the artist scream at us. We've got one lady who's not on with us today, Whitney, that she now has the reputation as the pop star whisperer, because I can put her in a role. She did Lauryn Hill with me, and I can put her in a role where she is just literally like dodging microphones being thrown at her head and is like, it's okay. We're going to be great. It's going to be a good show. Like, this is going to be awesome. You're fine, you know, and the show goes on. So is it a double standard? Sure. But it's also starting to benefit women as a whole that we do have the reputation of being able to be a psychologist on the road and be good listeners, sit in that pause and let the labor, you know, I'm the cachet, I'm the filter for my whole team. They come to me, they talk shit about the production team, or, you know, the lighting team's pissing off the audio team, the labor lead for the union just walked off, whatever it is, they come into my office, they're ranting and raving. I take a pause, I take the information, I filter it through the bullshit filter, I find the things that are actually needing to get done. I walk out on the site and go, hey, what's up? Oh, you guys are on your 15. Back over to Mono World. Hey, they're on their 15. You know, like, was that so hard? No, not really, but I guess that's what I'm getting paid for, so I love it.
Awesome. Yeah, well, so we have time for just one more. If you guys don't mind, someone's asked if you can speak to one very memorable learning experience you've gained on the job in the audio industry. So I don't know, Loreen, do you want to go first?
Oh Lord. There are so many learning opportunities. Okay. I will start this statement by one of my favorite phrases when I do a show and people are freaking out and stuff. I like to look at them and go, I fucked up bigger shows than this. And I mean that in the best and truest possible way, because I have. One of the most, I think, important learning lessons that I took away as an engineer in general, was I was monitor tech for, I can't remember the name of the festival, but it was a big festival up in, or I used to live in Pennsylvania at the Montage Mountain. I don't think they have Peach Fest. I can't remember what it was exactly up there, but it was a huge pop day. And I was the monitor tech for the whole stage. We had a profile and a 5D on stage, and I was doing everything myself. I was basically like the stage manager and the monitor tech / engineer if someone didn't have anything. And I guess I'll say the band name because it's traumatizing for me, because like it was really a traumatic experience. It was Andrew McMahon and the Wilderness came on. And I've worked with them since then. It's a much different game than it was back then. But when they came through, they had literally every position except a monitor engineer. And they came with a file on a stick. So they had a front house person, they had a merch person, they had a guitar tech, they had a lady who stapled grass to the top of the piano for 4 hours, but they didn't have a monitor engineer. So fast forward, we get to their changeover, 20-minute changeovers, as they are with most festivals, even for large scale productions. They're throw and go, you know, they click, and except they don't have a monitor engineer, and I'm running their ears off of a file that I just loaded into a console. Can we stop? And sorry, things. And are you serious right now? And I'm sorry, Grace, laughing at me. Of course. So I plug it in and we're going through the sound check. There is no sound check because they can't get their front of house console that they brought to talk to the stage boxes. And I'm on a separate split with my stuff. So I am trying to get gains in. So we have to spend 15 minutes getting their snake figured out. Well, I have less than 5 minutes to go through 61 channels of gain for their ears, and they didn't do a line check. So basically, they just started their set. I'm on a file that I have no idea about, on a profile. I've never seen it before in my life, and it is a disaster. Like, it is just a disaster. I am in the ears. I'm doing my best to try to level things out. But when you have 61 channels that you haven't gone through a gain structured, you're on a different split than the one before. All the gains are messed up. I'm trying to fix it. It was so bad that the guitar tech came up and pushed me off the console. The guitar tech. And I was like, you know what? I was pretty much in tears at this point. Like, I'm like, you know what? You do you. If you think you can do better, go on. And it was only better purely for the fact that the band knew him, not because he knew anything about the console. They calmed down just because he happened to be standing there. And my boss ladies, you know, like, we have to be perfect. Like, when I'm doing something, people look at me. Like, the performance that I have to get to where I am now in my career, I've had to probably work twice as hard as most of the dudes just to get noticed, just to get the opportunity. So, like, I was a perfectionist, and I took it personal. Like, I really took it personal. And my boss pulled me off to the side, you know, and I've worked with this man since I was 16 years old. He really took a very paternal role with me. And he goes, Loreen, like, stop, breathe. You cannot take this personal. You can never take this personal. Like, you can't let this color your next experience. Like, you're going to mess up. You're going to have days like this. Like, you're a human. Like, you cannot be perfect all the time. It is statistically impossible. Like, you cannot deliver 100% every day. And you have to be able to take these failures and move on and learn from them. Like, take this experience. Like, you'll never be in a scenario like this again, ever. Like, if they hand you a file, you'll be like, I don't want the file. I want to start from scratch. I'd rather do my ears than deal with this. You know, you learned a lesson, but you can't take it personal. Like, don't let this color your next festival tech experience, because that will just be detrimental to your learning. The most successful people in the world have had gargantuan failures. That's part of the process. So, like, the most important learning thing that I learned, and that it was not to take it personal. Like, when someone's screaming at you over something, don't take it personal. Like, if they're screaming at you, it's probably not because of you. It's probably because of a bunch of external factors that have just built up to this moment, and you're the person that's there, and that thing just pushed you over. Artists included. Like, man, I worked for Anita Baker. Like, Grace is talking about nightmare artists to work with. Like, she's a nightmare. She is horrible. She just screams at you. She talks shit about you on stage.
She still does that.
I know, because she still calls me for work. Like, for some reason she likes me, but she really just likes to fuck with me. So, like, I don't really know.
Not you. It's just, literally at Montreux, the Montreux we just did. Yeah. I went to her show. It was horrible. She yelled at her monitor engineer her entire show.
Take it personally. Punching bag.
Yeah, you can't take it personally. That's one of those ones where, like, she's just been like that her whole life. Like, and you do things you would never characteristically do with this person. Like, with Anita Baker, it's the only time in my entire career as a monitor engineer that I crossed downstage center of an artist singing. Only time in my career, and I recrossed center because she was talking on the microphone, literally screaming out to Huggy at front of house that the monitors weren't working for like 5 minutes, and I was not having it. But that's why she calls me back, because that was also an important lesson, because I'm not scared of her. And apparently all the guys are scared of her. So she really respected me that I stood up to her, because I walked out on stage and literally stuck my head in all of the wedges. Went down center to her crazy 4-wedge setup where she has 2 wedges where it's just her vocal and the outside wedges are just straight reverb. Stuck my head into the wedges, made sure everything, and went through every wedge on the stage and put my head in front of it, and then crossed back in front of her downstage, stopped on the downstage and looked at her and went, everything's fine, and walked off stage. She still calls me back, and I've never heard her scream at me on stage again. So, like, just don't take it personal, man. Like, be confident in yourself. But, like, the most important thing I ever learned is don't take it personal. Lauryn Hill, she's like that because she has a chip on her shoulder from somewhere else. Anita Baker is like that because she has a chip on her shoulder from someone else. quite frankly, a lot of it is because they were women in a male-dominated industry in times where they were treated like they didn't know. Like Anita Baker took classes at Full Sail because she wanted to know more about audio, because she had had so much time of men telling her that she didn't know what she was talking about. So like, you know, you have to kind of deal with some of that. Like I had to tell the guys that were working with me, be like, hey, can you go sit over here so you're not right next to me? It's nothing personal, but I think she would rather just see a female over here because it calms her down, you know? So you just can't take stuff personal is my biggest lesson.
Cool. Does anyone else have anything to add? Rachel, toss it to you.
I think it's kind of piggybacking off that is, you know, you've fucked up bigger gigs in this. And I think I've stolen this from someone else, is nothing is fucked and everything is manageable. We're not in a recording studio, and it's less about pointing fingers and taking the blame and like, how do we move forward? This is fucked up. Now, how do we fix it? And, you know, I did a gig this last year with the band who I love, who I've done multiple gigs with before, called the Twilight Sad, and they're amazing. And we had the worst show of our life at the Pasadena Daydream Festival, in front of their management, in front of their label, in front of any band they'd ever met. And, you know, we had issues where the PA was cutting in and out for the entirety of our 2 p.m., 30-minute set at 95 degrees. And it was just, I wanted to duck under the console and die. I have never had a gig that bad before or since then. And I think as shitty as that day was, understanding like sometimes we have shit gigs. Sometimes in the millions of shows that you're going to mix or work on tour, one of them is going to go drastically wrong. Nobody died. Nobody passed out. Nobody broke anything. You know, we got through the day, and now, you know, that's always going to be the gig that we don't talk about, but we've kind of gotten that one done. And now any gig will always be better than that gig. So it's a little bit about, you know, it's not personal and it's not perspective. You have to realize that, like, look at all these amazing shows that we've done and all these amazing tours that we've done, and we're never going to talk about that show ever again. And, you know, now I know how to fix what went wrong during that show that I didn't know before. It was a mess. It was awful for everyone involved. And then we went to Asia and played a bunch of really amazing shows. And, you know, you kind of have to get the bad one out of the way to have perspective for all the ones that are really amazing. You're like, all right, I can't fix this. How do I fix this moving forward so we don't have this? You know, we're not surgeons. We're not doing rocket science. We're not sending people to the moon. We're putting on shows. No one died today. And I think that sometimes having a little bit of perspective when everything gets really chaotic, you know, kind of makes it, you can calm yourself down and move forward through things.
And Rachel touched on blame. One of the stiffest lessons I ever learned, and I try to push my mentees to remember, especially in the heat of the moment or when a show has gone to absolute shit, don't blame, and definitely don't point the finger at other techs or other people on site. Making excuses will always sound like even if you're giving someone like a stage manager or an artist the best reasons that it's all gone to shit, it's gear or it's timing or it's this or it's all these really concrete evidence in your mind, it will always sound like excuses to someone else. So just don't do it. Just keep it out of your mouth. You have plenty of time after the shitstorm is over to discuss all of the ins and outs of why it happened the way it did. But during that moment, avoid blame at all cost.
Sometimes you have to own things that aren't you in that moment.
Yeah.
You have to make things go, and you have to be okay with that and the potential that you might lose your job over it.
It's very true. I was gonna say on more of like a technical side, just don't lead with assumption. And especially when you're walking in, you know, if it's not your rig, even if it is your rig, you know, a lot of us tour and we have, you know, rental stuff that's with us. And so we're using the same console, same mics and same everything every day. But then in the middle of the tour, you're playing a festival or you're playing 5 festivals or you're doing whatever the hell you're doing. And it's easy, especially in the time crunch of a festival, like, you know, like Loreen said, like changeovers are like 15 minutes. And it's like, how the hell are we supposed to get all this shit on and line check in 15 minutes? See our Coachella set last year. But for real, like, you know, take the time. If you can show up to a festival early and even just go, and it's like, it's no shade on the production crew or anything. It just might not be what you advanced, or somebody may have missed something. And if you can show up early and double check the stuff that you're going to use. I mean, there was a gig last year where power went out at front of house at this festival, and and I'm up on stage and I have no idea what's going on, and Amanda's down in front of house, and we're like, we lost the PA. Why did we lose the PA? What the hell's going on? There was no battery backup, and video had plugged into the audio power drop. Like, just, you know, and it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to look at every time and make sure, okay, every time there's a battery backup, it's working, and that, you know, video and lights are not plugged into our shit. It's, you know, just save yourself the headache later.
Jess, we were on a couple of the same festivals this year. I can't remember what festival it was that I came in and I didn't have most of my rig, and you have almost the same exact rig as me. And you were coming in 2 days after. Can't remember what festival it was. Was it like Minneapolis or
Mopop?
Mopop. They didn't have my rig at all. Like, they didn't have any of it. And I went the night before. Luckily, like Jess is saying, like, I went down the night before and walked in, and they didn't have my wave server. They didn't have half my ears. They didn't have any of it. And Jess was actually coming in the next day on the same console and has almost the same setup as I do. So, like, it ended up being like, I ended up calling Jess because I guess your gear was there or something. And I pulled, like, I ended up using her server so that we could get through my set. Like, you just make sure you go and check, and also call your friends. Like,
I will
save
say
yourself that headache later.
To kind of piggyback with Jess, a big lesson I learned is, even though you tour with gear, you always just know your gear. A Janelle show in San Francisco, which is one of her biggest markets. Start of show, and I have no sound, like nothing's coming out, and she's up there just going, like being Janelle Monáe, and I have nothing. And somehow I got the band out of my console, and I got her vocal into the festival console, so I had to mix the entire show running back and forth between two consoles, like. But before all that, the crowd's booing. She's yelling. Like, later on, I find out the bass player told me she's yelling my name. Like, yeah, I'm like, this is it. I'm going to work at Urban Outfitters or something. Like, my career is over. And I'm like going through my head because I'm on, at the time I was using the CL5, and it was a file I had used like the previous day. Like, I'm like, what's going on? So yeah, after that, like, I get pulled into the principal's office. Her assistant comes, like, Janelle wants to talk to you. I'm like, oh, it's over. God, it's over. And she's like, what happened? And like Grace said, is no explanation. That it just sounds like an excuse, you know. And I told her, I told them that I wasn't ready. I told Stage that I wasn't ready. They went ahead with the show, whatever. And I love her for this. She pulled them into the principal's office too and said, hey, if she's not ready, then we can't start the show. Like, if we have to listen to her, she's the entire show. So if she says she's not ready, you guys have to wait until we have sound, because if we don't have front of house, then we don't have a show. So later on, it's like grinding my gears why this happened to me. And trying something new, I put a compressor on my left, right, and I did not patch the output. So the input was patched, but to return it back, nothing. So I can't remember whether that's a serial or parallel connection, but whatever dynamic effect is, it cuts your signal. So you have to, like, know your gear. That goes back to the basic fundamentals of just knowing how things work. And if you're going to put a compressor on your left, right, make sure you make both patches, input, output, or you're going to be in front of like 40, 50,000 people booing you because you're at front of house in the middle of everybody. Like, what's going on? That was a huge lesson for me. Like, if you're going to try something new or whatever, you know, new piece of gear, like, make sure you know it and you've patched it and you know what you're doing.
Make sure you
don't change.
Don't change it. When the show goes well, they
Change
always
anything. Yeah.
they never know
Change
who
it
you
after
are.
That was the
sound
thing.
check.
I didn't
Yeah.
change.
Don't change
I
anything
loaded
after
my
sound.
file, and I'm like, I've used this file. What is happening? But I didn't check it because I trusted my file, and you can't do that. Don't even trust yourself. Like double, triple.
Trust no one.
Don't trust no one. Yeah, because when the show is bad, it's always your fault. Whether it's your
Yep.
fault or not, if you're at front of
Yep.
house, it's always when the show is good, the LD gets the compliment.
Yeah.
Yep.
And never ever do firmware's day of show.
Yes.
Right.
That's the worst
really,
thing ever.
really are desperate. I had to do a couple of Digico upgrades on my day of shows, and I only had one that went weird, and I had a fader that didn't work. So sometimes you have to, but like pray it all works.
Exactly. Guys, this has been great. I hate to cut it off, but we're way over, and I don't want to be disrespectful of anybody's time, but maybe we should get together again. But your conversation's been really interesting to watch, and we can't thank you more for joining us today. So please,
having us.
you know, if you have time, maybe we'll do this again.
Yeah, that'd be
But,
awesome.
Heck yeah.
and I want to say thanks to the audience and Jessica and for taking over when my internet crashed halfway through. Thank you. But audience, thanks for coming. And, you know, if you want to catch any more of our educational things, it's Sennheiser.com/webinars. And we hope to see you next time. So thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. This has been great.
Take care.
Thank you for having us.
Good to talk to y'all.
Bye.